How do you understand the millennia of testimony, of answered prayer, of spiritual experiences beyond reason, of bad people becoming good through faith? What's the source for that? Do you believe there is a source in all things good?
No, I don't. I mean, I believe people who tell me they've seen ghosts, for example, and had visions of the Virgin Mary. I have no reason to doubt. I think they saw them, but they weren't there.
No, I'm not talking about those kind of experiences.
You mean conversion experiences? People say, now I will finally... The President of the United States says, I will exchange Jack Daniels for Methodism. A trade I cannot imagine anyone making. Because Jesus told me I should do it. Well, I think that Laura Bush said, listen, and it's been said before in Texan society, it's Jack Daniels or me, asshole. And if you do that again, I'll leave and I'll take the kids. You say, Jesus got me off the drink, fine. I said already, whatever floats the boat. Just leave me out of it. I don't want to hear this stuff, and it doesn't give you the right to tell me what to do. How many times must I say it? How many times already? Amen. How long, oh Lord, how long?
For me, the death of Christ on the cross means that something that I could never gain for myself has been done for me and offered to me. In other words, it is something that by myself as a human being I could never hope to achieve, is achieved on my behalf and offered to me, and I am asked, will you accept what has been done for you? In other words, it is about the possibility of transformation being offered to me but not being imposed upon me. And for me, that is about a God who offers but does not demand that I respond to him in this way. And I find that to be a very good summary of what the Christian faith is trying to say about a God who offers but does not impose. And again, those of you who are familiar with the New Testament will think of the imagery of Revelation chapter 3, which speaks of Christ knocking on the door and asking us to open, but leaving that action open to us.
Okay.
Mr. Hitchens.
Not imposed? Did you really say not imposed? What if you reject this offer? What are you told by, what have you been told for centuries by Christians? If you reject this offer that took place by means of a torture to death of a human being that you didn't want and should have prevented, if you could. What if you reject the offer? If you accept it, you can have eternal life and your sins are forgiven. Oh, great. What a horrible way to abolish your own responsibility and get your own bliss. I don't want it. Oh, you don't? Well, then you can go to hell. This is not imposed. This hasn't been preached to children by gruesome elderly virgins backed by force for centuries. This hasn't poisoned whole societies. No, of course it's not voluntary. The Pope of Rome, as I call the Bishop of Rome, Mr. Ratzinger, Herr Ratzinger, has recently said, actually, it's worse than that. Only my version of Christianity can get you salvation. And there is only one way. I say it in Georgetown. There's only one. You presumably don't believe that because you're an Anglican. But on what basis do you tell the Pope that he's a heretic? Once you grant this stuff, once you start with this white noise chat about redemption, where is it going to end? Of course there's nothing voluntary about it. And I must say the book of Revelation seems one of the less voluntary texts of the... all it does is look forward gleefully to apocalypse, to the passing away of this veil of tears into our ultimate destruction. This is morality? I don't think so. As to the center versus the fringe, I get this all the time. Don't judge religion by its fundamentalists and its extremists. No, why should I? I don't have to. I judge it by its foundational texts, and I judge it by the statements of its authorities. Take a case from the Quran, just for once. Does it, actually it's not the Quran, excuse me, take a case from the Muslim foundational documents, the Hadith, which have equal canonical authority. They say, if someone becomes an apostate, leaves or changes their religion, they must be killed. The sentence is death. Don't anyone be telling me that's a metaphor. No, it's just intended as a sort of general admonition. No, it means what it says, and it's been applied to a couple of people who now have to live, friends of mine as a matter of fact, as political refugees in Washington, D.C., who know how true the impact of that hadith. There's no wiggle room there, so the question for a Muslim must be asked. Do you think this is the word of God, or don't you? Because if you don't, you're saying that God shouldn't be able to tell you to do an evil thing, and if you do, you're saying he should. In either case, faith falls as a reinforcement of ordinary morality. Recently, Dr. McGrath is a member of the Church of England, the Anglican Communion, the Episcopalian Communion, but what George Herbert, my favorite religious poet after John Donne, the sweet mediocrity of our native church was how he referred to the See of Canterbury. Everyone thinks it's the mildest of all. It not only calls itself a flock, it looks very sheep-like. However, the Bishop of Carlisle recently, tipped, I'm told, to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury, said that the floods in northern Yorkshire that devastated a large part of England in the summer and killed and dispossessed a large number of people were punishment for homosexuality. Now, to connect meteorology to morality seems to me, I have to say, flat out idiotic whichever way you do it. If there was a connection between meteorology and morality, which religion has very often argued that there is, I don't see why the floods hit northern Yorkshire. I can think of some parts of London where they would have done a lot more good. Just as the hurricane that devastated New Orleans, we found punishment for sin, as it must have been, left the French Quarter alone. You have to make up your mind on this. You either think God intervenes or he doesn't. I'm clear. I say, I don't think so. Will Dr. McGrath say that he does intervene and that we can tell when he does, or will he not say so? You have to ask him. You have to hear his answer. Does he say sometimes intervenes? Or does he say he moves in mysterious ways? My position is clear. His remains, I think, distinctly opaque. It was the Archbishop of Canterbury, Geoffrey Fisher, who said the following, that a nuclear war, thermonuclear war, would only hasten our transition into a more blessed state into which we would bound to eventuate anyway. If I had told you that remark and asked you to guess, you would have said Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said it, or some other fanatical verminous mullah. No, the Archbishop of Canterbury said it, and why shouldn't he? Because another immoral and sinister thing about religion is that lurking under it at all times, in every one of its versions, is a desire for this life to come to an end, for this poor world to be over. The yearning, the secret death wish that's in all of it, let this be gone, let us move to the next stage, is present at all times, unless it's repudiated, which I invite Dr. McGrath to do. But if he does so, I don't see in what eschatological sense he can claim to remain a Christian.
What would you say to the argument that since we don't know what will happen after death, it's better to take the strategy that you believe in God, because then if you die and there is God, maybe you have a chance of going to heaven, whereas if you didn't do that, you know.
Well, you'll like that section in my very moderately priced book, which, as most of you will know, the gentleman is summarizing actually almost perfectly the wager of Blaise Pascal, whose pensées, his thoughts, were addressed actually to the one who is so made that he cannot believe. That's me. And he says, well, look at it like this, like some huckster. Like the guy who, from the megachurch the other day on the radio, tried to get me to pull into his parking lot because the Lord had cured his daughter of Hodgkin's disease. Like some really low-rent character says, what do you got to lose? If it's not true, we're all headed nowhere in any case. But if it was true by any chance, and you'd said you thought so, how bad could it be? Well, you talk about the way that religion degrades argument and degrades dignity and self-respect. There you have it in one syllogism. But I have my answer, the following. On the assumption that the God they're talking about is anything like the one they ought to be believing in, this is what I say in my book I'm going to say. By the way, but just before I tell you, you know what Bertrand Russell said in reply to the same question? He said, I should reply, oh Lord, you did not give us enough evidence. Which I think is pretty good, but my reply goes on just a fraction longer. It says, I presume, divine sir, that you have some respect for intellectual honesty and for moral courage, and that you would look with more favor on somebody who made an honest profession of unbelief than on someone who acceded to belief in you in the hope of a handout.
glad you talked about Occam's razor, but let's get to the end of our life individually. How do you answer Pascal's wager as far as I've never heard an anti-theist explain, maybe a short explanation of Pascal's wager.
Will be short.
Yeah.
But I can also say that, as well as at fine bookstores everywhere, my book, which you can get now, does have a discussion of this very question. So if I seem to stumble on by condensing it, you can get my more rounded view. Pascal's wager, in case it's not known to you, comes from Blaise Pascal, who addresses his pensée to the one who is so made as that they cannot believe. That's me. And he says, well, let me put it to you like this. What have you got to lose? If you bet God exists and loves you and you're wrong, you're no worse off than you were already. If you bet and you're right, there is no such thing. You're no worse off than you were already. If you're wrong and there is, you win, as long as you have said you agree with him. So why don't you do it now while there's still time? I have two comments on this. One, religious hucksterism of the cheapest, vulgarest, nastiest kind it's possible to imagine. He says, what do you got to lose? I've got a good offer for you. Come into my used car lot. Come on, baby, just lie a little, and you never know. No, don't talk to me like that, and don't call it piety when you do, or be prepared to have piety despised. Second, Bertrand Russell, when asked this question, said that if confronted with his maker, he would say, I used to be able to do his accent, "Oh Lord, you did not give us enough evidence." I would go a little further. I would say, well, look, boss, if it's true what they say about you, that you're an infinitely kind, forgiving, all-fatherly person, this is certainly what your fans keep saying, do you not have a little room in your, obviously very capacious heart for someone who just couldn't bring himself to believe in you and really, honestly, truly couldn't? As opposed to someone who won't spend half their life on their knees making fawning professions of faith because Pascal told them it was a good bet. Which of us is the more moral? Which of us is the more honest? Which of us is the more courageous? Which of us has the bluest eyes and is the most sexually attractive? Which of us has the real charisma here? I'm just only asking.